Okay, I am live. I'm rocking. I'm rolling. I'm rocking. I'm rolling. I'm just a Midwest metagelical. Okay. So I kind of wanted to live stream about this yesterday, but I didn't. I don't know. I didn't make time. I was doing other things. It's always a balance of what you can do, what you can't do, what you should do, discerning all those things. Um, so this is God, what's your name? I forget your first name. Morning talk show. What's your first name? This is a online friend, wonderful gentleman, Aaron. Aaron's your name. Got it. I'm really blanking on. I'm kind of. I was talking with some friends earlier, and I was blanking on a lot of references because the things that I'm trying to pull from for my mosaic vision. What up, Peter? Are disparate, and I don't have them readily formed. But what happened? So let's watch something here, because I think this will be a good intro into this whole shtick. So my boy Jordan Daniel Wood, who I just had a conversation with Nate and Dr. Chris Green, made this post on Twitter. What up, Steven? I would love your thoughts on this too, Steven. I know we were just messaging this morning too. And I'm gonna get into it. Here's the thing. This is gonna be this is gonna be saucy. This is gonna be spicy. This is gonna be one of those things where this has come up a lot recently. So Michael Sartori had a beautiful video about it, which I don't think I finished. I think at the end of the talk that Jordan, Chris, Nate, and I, and then Sherry came in at the end, that we had about God is not a master, really brought in a holistic view, which I call personalism, which is don't fall into the binaries on either side of a perspective or opinion or an ideology or a perspective. Have strong opinions, but maintain the unity, which is because there is always a hidden unity behind any distinction. Right in the left hand of God, pro-Trump immigration, anti-Trump immigration policies. What does that mean for Christianity? Because this blew up on Twitter the other day. Yeah, Mark, I know this is going to stress people out. But this is the thing. I am a contrarian. I have, this is a big thing we talk about in TLC, is that I have big five temperamental makeup, where I like the areas where people disagree is where I'm naturally drawn. I'm naturally drawn to where people disagree, because I think that's where the gold is to be mined. Why? What's going on there? What is that oppositional processing trying to teach us, even in the really old Jewish understanding of man and woman coming together, and the woman being a helpmeet, and being the questioner of the masculine assertion. So the man asserts and the woman questions, brings in tension, brings in the question, and that is where the two become one. And so I'm not saying this I'm not wanting to talk about this to do a culture war thing. Dylan Moran, this is from Peter Rollins, from Dylan Moran, this Irish comedian, who says, war is the inability to have conflict. Okay. So Nick, you're here. Good. I want your engagement on this. I'll try to get through this quick so I can talk to some of you guys, because I have to leave at what time, babe? 10:10. Are you still here? 10:10. Okay. So I got to leave in 50 minutes. Let's try to work through this. Let's play some of this. Let's play this video. I want to talk about something else, and then I want to get into it. Okay, let's see. Okay, here we go.
A very Christian concept, but there's this old school, and I think it's a very Christian concept, by the way, that you love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens in your own country, and then after that, you can focus and prioritize the rest of the world. A lot of the far left has completely inverted that. They seem to hate the citizens of their own country and care more about people outside their own borders. That is no way to run a society. And I think the profound difference that Donald Trump brings to the leadership of this country is the simple concept, America first. It doesn't mean you hate anybody else. It means that you have leadership. And President Trump has been very clear about this, that puts the interests of American citizens first. In the same way that the British prime minister should care about Brits and the French should care about the French, we have an American president who cares primarily about Americans, and that's a very welcome change.
What is President Xi doing? What is Vladimir Putin?
He's looking after the Chinese. Putin is looking after the Russians. That they're entitled to do that. Thank God we now have an American president who's looking after the citizens of his own country.
Isn't it?
But there's this.
How mad are we going to be? Okay, so Jordan, none of this is to put anybody on blast, okay? So let's just control your passions. Feelings are good. Emotions are good. The law is just if used lawfully. Your emotions are good if they are submitted to the highest good, which is God, love, etc. Make America Florida. All right, so let's see what Jordan said. So JD Vance said there's a Christian concept to love your family, blah, 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 blah. A lot of the left has inverted that. Is it subsidiarity? Is that the Catholic idea of this? Subsidiarity is, what am I? So this is also a Catholic idea because so JD Vance, right? He is I don't know what his upbringing was when he was a kid. I don't know. I think he's a Catholic convert. So I mean, I'm guessing he was just raised metagelical, essentially, and became Catholic, right? Which is kind of a metagelical thing. So are we? Oh, am I not sharing this? I'm not sharing the subsidiarity that I looked up. Okay, stop screen. No. Let's go back. Sorry. We'll share a screen. I want to go back to that. So subsidiarity is a Catholic social teaching that states decisions should be made at the lowest level possible. It's a core principle that ensures that people have a voice in decisions that affect them. So people that are most affected by the issue. I think this is very related. I don't want to go into all of this, but you can look up Catholic subsidiarity, and I think that's related. I'm not a Catholic. I don't understand a lot of these things. I think it's good. There's also Catholic social teaching on oh, I'm forgetting. I don't have enough of this ready to rock. Okay, I'm just winging it because mainly I want to get into the conversation, but I'm laying the groundwork. So Jordan said, if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even the sinners do the same. So quote in the Bible. And Jordan went back and forth with a lot of people doing a lot of, I saw other Catholic, this was a very Catholic thing. I think other Christians got involved, but I saw a lot of Catholic tweets going back and forth. So I replied because I was talking about my binary live stream, and so I said, in regard to this, I think we need to be careful not to absolutize either mode. The non-duality, which includes duality. The prescription for the rich young ruler is particular. So what I'm talking about there is the rich young ruler who comes to Jesus, says, what must I do to be saved? And Jesus says, And the rich young ruler says, well, I've been doing these things since my birth, like keeping the law. And so Jesus says, okay, clearly this is not enough for you. So you need to level up for you. This isn't like a universal prescription. You feel the need that something is lacking. Okay, go sell everything you have and give to the poor. And the rich young ruler goes away because he has much wealth. So a lot of people want to read that and say, well, that's the call for everybody to give up everything that they want right now. But I don't think that's true. My priest said this, and I don't think that's true. That was what the rich young ruler needed for him in that moment, because he still felt that there was something that was lacking. And Sherry said this brilliantly. I think this is true in the conversation about God is not a master at the end. Everyone's going to have to give up everything eventually, because we all die. You can't take it with you. The only thing you're going to take with you is what is true, good, and beautiful, and love. And even that, you have to die. Like, if you seek to save your life, you will lose it. But if you lose your life for my sake, then you will find it, So Jordan said, I think we need to embrace the right dualities. The embrace of evil and good isn't the same as one good and another. All I'm doing is quoting Jesus. If people want to qualify away his direct challenge to the principle of proximity, which is kind of like that subsidiarity thing we were just talking about, then that's fine. But Vance brought Christ into this. So then here's my boy Morning Talk. Like, who is my neighbor, right? That's the question. Who is my neighbor, right? Who am I called to? Here I think is one of the big problems with this. And I want to talk about one other thing after I say this and then bring people in because I really don't have time. You can take it with you. That's the whole point of genealogies. Okay. Hopefully you can come and play, Stephen, if you have thoughts about this. I don't want to get caught up on comments right now. Take it with you when you go. I think that's a Tom Waits song. Okay. So what I want to talk about, though, is absolutizing prescriptions, which I think is one of the big problems of the world and of our moral judgments on the other, especially in this post-identitarian world, is we want to say, okay, this is a rule, this is a law, this is moral code, this is what Jesus said, and then you want to take that and apply it universally to all people at all times in all contexts the same way. But this is why that's not personalism, because what that is identical replicationism. It's Christ, 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 Christ. It's Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ, instead of Christ in me, which is we are all gods. And the call of a Christian is that God became man, that man should become God. And my call is to be Christ in me. So my call is not to be Jesus Christ. My call is to be Christ in Luke, the Whitestone name. And what that means for me is particular to me. And so, like, what is very hard about this, though, what really complicates the issue in the modern world, and this is probably, we're going to have to bring in give to Caesar what is Caesar and give to God what is God's, but in a globalized technological world where people can, where like to immigrate into another country and to have outsiders and people in and people out, when we have cars, planes, trains, and automobiles, what does it mean to have a nation with a border and have immigrants coming in and to love your neighbor, and how semi-permeable can those borders be? And what does that do to culture and transition? And what is the wisdom and how fast you allow that transition to happen? Because, C.S. Lewis spoke about this also. This is something I brought up many times in the Four Loves, is he said there's a difference in patriotism, as C.S. Lewis talks about it, and ethnocentrism. Patriotism and the love of your country, like the hobbits in, let's say, in the Lord of the Rings, they love Hobbiton. That doesn't mean that they hate the elves. They love the elves, but they're not elves. They're hobbits. And so, like, it's not wrong for them to love hobbit stuff and pipeweed and gardening. That's what hobbits do. It's great for them to love hobbits. But if all those borders become too fluid and too fast, and like, you lose, what actually happens is you get what happened in America, which is the urban monoculture, and you lose all distinctions, and then it becomes just like an amorphous brown blob. Now, like, what is the wisdom and how all that should work for a modern nation state? I don't know. I really don't know. Okay, and so then the other thing that I put in my comments, in my description of this, is one of my local buddies. So if you're here, one of my local friends, Dan. I have many Dan friends. Like, my local life is how in the TLC we have Jordan, 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 Jordan. My local life is like Dan, 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 Dan. I have 500 Dans in my life. But a local friend, Dan, sent me this Substack, which is in the description. You can look at it if you want. I don't know these guys. They're called the Holy Heretics. I like the name. And I think the guy's name, what is the guy's name? Because I read this. I mean, Dan, this is big praise. I actually read this Substack article this morning. It's called Trump's Willing Executioners, and it's ordinary evangelicals and the sin of empathy. So they talk about empathy and how there's a lot of, here, can I copy it? Yeah, I'll copy it. I'll share it. because I want to just show some of this as I'm reading it, and then I'm going to open this up. Okay, because I'm very low on time. Okay, Trump's willing. I mean, and it's so this thing read to me as I was reading this read just like a culture war condemnation of Trump people and people who want to stop immigration and make America first and prioritize America, like that stuff Vance was talking about. It seemed like a demonization of them. And it really reads like that for a long time. Just stop it. Until I got to this, and it's talking about the sin of empathy and how like all these guys talk about the sin of empathy, which is something that's come up locally in book clubs. I have a guy in my book club who wrote an article on the sin of empathy, I think. And blah, 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 blah. But then they have this line. Where is that sentence? I'm sorry. Toxic empathy. And it talks about a lot of Buddhism stuff. Like Mark D. Parker's going to like this. Okay, I must have missed it. Sorry, guys. I didn't have this pulled up and ready. Because then he said this line that made me think, okay, this is great. This is a great line by Buechner. I love Francis Buechner. But describe compassion as it is this working? Yeah. It is the knowledge that there can never be really any peace and joy for me until there is peace and joy finally for you too. Welcome to Christian Universalism. There we go. If empathy is a sin, sin boldly. It's talking about LGBTQ things, which is like that Episcopalian minister who delivered that sermon to Trump. This is just a lot of what's going on in the zeitgeist right now. And I want this to be anti-culture war that includes space for culture warriors. Where's the line? See, like this kind of language. It's like evangelicalism is cruel because white evangelicals are cruel. Like, I mean, that's like, God, that's such triggering language. And it's comparing Trump to Hitler, blah, you know, all that kind of stuff. But he flipped it at some point. Dang it. Where was the flip where he said, I'm really sorry, guys. Where he questions himself. He turns the lens of judgment back on himself. And I felt like that was really good. I must have not gone far enough. Buddhism, blah, 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 blah. Coming close to suffering. The next stage. Yes. Okay. The next stage in my spiritual development is learning to have compassion for the evangelical community that is currently causing the world, the nation, and ours so much pain. I'm not there yet. So like he admits, that's probably why I wrote it that way. I'm not there yet. I say none of this out of condemnation. Most of my family and friends are evangelical Christians. Sadly, almost all of them voted for Trump. See, like even there, sadly, like you're like, and he says he's not there yet, but like even when he says sadly, he's not able to put himself in the place where he has empathy for Trump people, where he can see that as where he can see the seed of somebody who maybe voted for Trump as a potential good, and as like they're trying to do the best they can. Can you do that? If you see all this stuff with the people that are pro-Trump that you disagree with, this is like what I wanted to say. Okay, I care for them and hope that they cease causing harm. If I withhold empathy towards them, I am also part of the problem. Yes. So this is where I would say he gets it, and he's admitting that he's not yet there yet, but he doesn't yet know as he ought to know. That 1 Corinthians 8 thing. Sorry, OG, I'm going to come back to comments. I will pay attention to this, and I'm going to open this up. So like, here's the thing. If you can't get to the place where you can genuinely see in the people who disagree with you a good or a seed of good, that they want to be good, that they're not just doing it because they're evil, because they're bad, you're going to be in an endless culture war. Like that's the move that we have to make. There are going to be people who probably disagree with whatever I'm saying here. And I have to make space for them that for whatever reason they're pushing back on me, there's a seed of good in it, or else we're just stuck in the Ouroboros of our own trapped ideologies, and it's unending war. Okay. I'm very sorry that I wasn't looking at comments. I'm going to look at them. I know this is a hard topic. If people come in here and talk, that's great. Control your passions. Have respectful, loving conversation, because that's what I'm trying to model. because I know this is a hot topic right now. It's hot. It's hot. Okay, I'm going to look at some comments. OG, empathy is seeing yourself or the possibility in the other. Yeah, I think that's right. Star manning? I don't even know what star manning is. It's a fun wordplay. It's fun words. I like that. Okay, Simply Austin said, I'm not preaching self-love by saying an American politician should love America first. It's not preaching. He's saying there's a scale of loving your neighbor, and it starts with the present, real other, who's American. You're talking about Vance. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what JD Vance is trying to say. He's trying to say, like, if you can't, in some sense, the way that I would steelman Vance or say what he's saying, it's like, and I think this is a useful illustration. I don't know that it works completely, but it's just like, you can have empathy for a drowning person, and you can go in to save them. But if you allow them to pull you under as well, then you're not like, then if, let's say I, like, I fall into I drive a car off of a bridge and my whole family's in the water and we're all like in trouble and it's cold and there's drowning. If I go to save one of my kids and they are flailing frantically and they are like gonna drag me under and I sacrifice everything to save them, then like my other family might drown, like, and I don't know what the proper calculus is with that. Like, these things are hard, but like, it's I don't know. Jonathan, what do you think? I'm going to keep looking at comments. It's a hard topic.
Yeah, I definitely like what you're saying about like.
You're very quiet.
Hello.
It's probably better.
Yeah, I like what you're saying about, trying to avoid absolutizing. That seems like a good thing, and I like how you connected that to Christ in me. That's really cool, I think, because I think that's a common mistake, especially among like people who don't think about these things a lot. They're like, oh, if we're all called to be like Christ, that means we all have to do exactly what Jesus did. But the whole idea of Christ in me is that it's like the telos for everyone is like personalized, such that you really can't make like these categorical statements about like what people should do, and at least in a sense. And like I think that might even go all the way to like advising particular religions. Like maybe somebody, it's like a terminological thing almost, such that maybe like somebody in China, the way that they would manifest Christ in them is to become a more observant Taoist or something, or like maybe even Islam or something. It's kind of touchy, but just in terms
You're
of
bringing in some perennialism just to really, to really mess up this conversation.
as like a, an inflammatory or provocative example of like what Christ in me might actually mean at like a global scale. I don't know about Islam, but maybe. Yeah.
Tayo, get in here. We need you. Yeah, white people are mad about globalism and they're shading it with Christian arguments. See, here's the thing. I know a lot of people feel that way. That article is all about that. And that article, I'm guessing that dude's white, maybe not, who wrote the article. So he has some of that white guilt, but like it's so, yeah, I don't want to go down that road right now. But anyhow, Michael.
I think, well, one thing, because I kept looking at the people that were, all the quote tweets from that one thing, and I was kind of spamming all of them, but because everybody's forgotten, like, or they're not familiar with JD Vance's story. He wrote that book, and there was that movie, Hillbilly Elegy. He is a poor, broke kid from Appalachia. His broken family, like generations of broken families. His mom's an opioid addict. He's raised by his grandma. His grandma tells him, focus on school. Don't worry about helping your mom. You can't help her. The best way to help her is for you to focus on school. And he goes and he does the Marines, and he goes to Yale, and he like makes something. It's like, and so the thing is, it's like he was that stranger. He was that neighbor. He was the guy in the ditch in the the Good Samaritan story.
Samaritan.
And then it's like, but now that he's achieved a high status where people resent him or whatever, or they're not like, what do you, that, because that's the thing, it's like, what do you want for these people? Isn't JD Vance like the ultimate, like the poster boy for what's possible, I guess you could say, in some sense. And my thought is that he could just have gone and made money in the private sector. He went into politics specifically to try to help the people in his backyard, the hillbillies in Appalachia.
I think that's true. I don't think he went into politics to try to get money and power.
Yeah.
Isn't there kind of like isn't he kind of like big fan of this whole AI governance thing though?
I don't know, because here's the thing. I don't really follow politics that much.
Yeah, neither do I.
I don't know a lot of this stuff. Also, Kate, I was gonna say you can.
I try and keep up with like what's like generally like, I don't know. I saw that they just did this whole thing where they're trying to push for AI governance, right?
I don't know. Let's table that though, because Tayo's here.
It's a big topic.
Tayo's here, and I know he has a little bit of a different perspective on this, so I want to hear it.
I'm just.
Mark Parker's here too.
I came in mainly because Michael was talking about JD Vance's rags to riches story as that, and using that as proof that he's the stranger. It's the opposite. It's proof that it makes sense why with this story why he wants to preserve and conserve things for people within America. And also, I've got no dog in this fight. I've got nothing to do with you lot's government. But there is a sense in which, because I'm a Christian, when I listen to Christian arguments being used as a tool for politics, it's sort of like, are you really, is the Christianity that you really care about, or are you really just using that as an argument to stir up your base?
Totally. But Tayo, wouldn't this be like Brexit is like the same thing, right?
Brexit means Brexit. Yes, you're exactly right. It is.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, JD's his conversion story is interesting too. Aaron Wren wrote a whole thing on about that because basically, because I think at some point he was living with his dad, like when he was a teenager, and his dad got saved in like a Pentecostal church, and he was like, and essentially you could say it's the people that are like, oh, the personal relationship with Jesus, this is what you need, and I think like that helped his dad get his life together, but then he saw like this gospel message isn't doing anything to solve the actual problems of the place that we live in, and the thing is to say, like, America's such a huge country, and if you're in Washington D.C., like going to the Appalachians is essentially a foreign country, like from this, from the perspective of like how close countries are in Europe and stuff like that. But and so that's why he consciously, when he was he's seeing the importance of religion, he chose Catholicism because he thought that it was important the way that it tries to preserve cultural structures and things like that. But I have a totally opposite direction. I will also share another example. So there's this book here. This guy goes to my church. He's a Mexican American, he's a Texan. He's a real Texan. There he is. And he's like, I know he voted for Trump, but he's very much about helping like the illegal aliens and stuff that are here in South Texas. And he has it like in a very practical way where he says, look, if they get deported, that's fair because they broke the law. But while they're here, let's help them out. Let's teach them the gospel. And his thing is basically like getting these people trained in how to study the Bible. And then he says, and if they get sent back to their countries, then they can make a difference back there. And I would say, even to take it a step further, it's like maybe those people could learn some things about like entrepreneurship. Because if you heard Chad's story with Melly, she's down there in Honduras, and it's like those people they need to learn how to like start a business, and then if they get kicked back, like do something to make Honduras better. Like it can't just be that America is the only place in the world that's the wealthy place. Like there needs to be like you have to look like, why is this successful, and it wasn't just because of stealing people, and take some of those good things and the gospel and all the full implications and spread it around like more fully.
Okay, here I want one administrative thing, and then I want to hear Nick because he's been in the comments. I want to hear what Nick's saying, but Mark's first. But the thing for me as the start of the stream, to me, the thing behind the thing is that you have to see the seed of the good in the person that disagrees with you. I don't want to get caught up in the minutia of the politics and like policy. I don't want to get caught up in that. You have to be able to see the seed of the good in the person that disagrees with you, or like there's no point in talking. That's my main point. And we have to, and I want to model that here. Don't get caught up in the minutia and the culture war bullshit, please. Okay, Mark.
Well, which Mark do you want to hear from? Do you want to hear, the one who's going to try to be maximally Christian in this, or do you want to hear my true opinion, or do you want to hear me correct the facts? I mean, the problem in Honduras is not about entrepreneurship; it's about corruption and cartels that have. So if you start a business in Honduras, you're going to be squeezed by the gangs, for example. So it's vastly more complex. I think the Lord is sending me back to Buddhism because I've got to spend a lot of time in meditation and mindfulness.
Yeah.
Because
no, I hear you. Yeah. My
nature is the brawl. I rather fight than do just about anything else. Because, and I can. I mean, I'm getting old. I'm not so good of a fighter anymore, but I would. But my nature is to just hit back really and hit back hard, and don't care. But there's I have an ethical commitment, and so what's the posture I'm going to try to take in all this? Well, for all of you people who think you need to have opinions and positions in all this, and you're going to take up a stance, and you're going to get hurt, and you're going to hurt others, I think the Christian's place to be is to be like like a medic. You're walking through the battlefield, and you carry water, and you mend wounds where you find them. And I'm going to treat the people who I think caused the problems the injured among them, the same as I'll treat those who I see as victims, because you're all victims of this nonsense. And that's kind of where I'm at. But I've got to put my mind in the right place for it, because, this week has been particularly rough spiritually.
Yeah.
But here's a kitty. Here's a good kitty.
That's right. I hear you, Mark. And I think I want to get to I completely understand all that. And I would like us to get to the point where we can talk about these things without falling into what I would call the egoic, passion-driven culture war stuff, And I think this is great. Like, this is why I love Tayo here. This is why I love having Nick here. And Nick and I have often, kind of battled back and forth a little bit. Nick, okay, buddy, what do you have to say?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I missed a little bit of this, but I guess the reason I went on a crusade the last 2 days was not, in my opinion, a culture war thing. I really want to make that clear. Like, if you guys could hear me in conversations with like some of my in real life circles, you'd think I'm on the other side. So like, I'm really not trying to do culture war stuff, but It was because I feel like Vance said like the most common sense thing I would want to hear from someone who was a civil authority. And also, I don't, like I said, he wasn't saying this is the gospel or this is Christianity. He was just ordering, like, how can we best do this? And like Michael said, he was a victim of certain segments of the population being just totally forgotten, taken advantage of, left behind. And so, like, I'm not trying to say, like, anti-immigration. I'm actually pretty pro-immigration, but just this idea, and it's important to remember the context he laid it out in, that there is this inverse at play, and it even scales down to the individual level, where, like, we have a hard time ordering things, like, individually. Like, things are so scattered, they're so flattened. And so I feel like he just said the most common sense thing, which does fit into the Christian tradition. And he said, I think it's a Christian idea. And I could not believe the backlash. Like, I would understand, like, yeah, I don't know about this, I don't know about that. But just the sheer backlash and people calling it a false gospel, I was just like, I was blown away. And so that's why I just sort of was like, okay, this, if we can't say the most common sense crap, then I don't know what we have. He didn't say we're not going to take care of the other. He said we have to get our priorities straight. Our house isn't in order. That's all he said.
Well,
So that was my 2 cents.
That's almost fair, Nick, almost, because it didn't quite say, I think this is a Christian way of ordering things. He says authoritatively that this is, and I agree with you, it's a very, it's the base for what a politician that's in charge of a covered nation should say. You should prioritize the nation that voted you in. But it's the Christian smuggling that I think people have a problem with, and you clearly don't, because that's aligns with the way you would order things in that order. But there are Christians on the other side that would prioritize the stranger, hospitality of the stranger over the
But
well-being of the.
I guess that's my thing. Like Luke said earlier, we're in a globalized world. So that person on the other side, do they really have the stranger in their house, or do they want the stranger in their country in someone else's neighborhood? Now, I know that sounds harsh, but JD Vance knows the types of people who are actually having to deal with this stuff on the ground. I know them. I know the communities. The people on the screens, the people, the intellectuals on Twitter, they don't live in those neighborhoods. Now, there are notable exceptions, okay?
It's like a
Right?
luxury
Like some of the best
belief, you're
people.
saying. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I
Yes.
think if that was the point he was making, that would be fair enough. If it was talking about there is a way in which if you're only talking about it, but you don't actually, but you're not welcoming a stranger into your home and sacrificing. It's why Paul talks about Tim Keller. The difference to the social justice warrior is pointing out the fact that you have to actually sacrifice and do the work in the way Paul saw his parents did in the racial reconciliation movement. If that was the point that JD Vance was making, I don't think a lot of people would have a lot of things to say. But he's speaking, like a lot of people have said, from his own personal story, which is very much valid. But he's generalizing in a way that should and does make some Christians uncomfortable. And I think that's understandable. It shouldn't be baffling to a whole bunch of, unless you've interwoven your Christianity so much with your politics that there is a sense in which if you're Democrat, you're not Christian. That's what it's coming across as.
Well, that's fine, but an entire, like, liberal left-wing Christianity has infused itself into the broader culture. So and it gets to call itself, like, well, we're not Christian, we're just secular. It's like, that's fine, but the part of the weird thing about this Christian civil war is, like, it's so infused itself into the culture that, like, sort of the one wing of the civil war is, like, able to say, like, we're not religious, we're not Christian at all, but, like, it's all Christian ethics, just sort of gone off center. And then the other side identifies as it, but it's, maybe a little off kilter too. But as for this specific clip Luke played, Teo, I have to really disagree with you. I do not see any of what you're talking about in that clip at all. So I disagree that
What do you see that
leads
Teo is
people to
saying
something
in
to
the
be
clip?
baffled. No, sorry. What he's seeing of, like, that Vance isn't saying what I'm saying. I feel like I just literally repeated what Vance is saying, and Teo's saying, well, Vance is generalizing in a way that's not helpful, and he's infusing politics and Christianity. I'm like, you'll have to point out the exact words that he said that we're wrong. I'm not seeing them.
I don't think we disagree on the fact. I think, like anything, it's always in the meaning realm that the culture will take place. It's a battle in the heavens, and as I think someone else quoted it. So it's the fact of what he said. I think we can. There's video evidence. We can replay it 10 times. I think the meaning of what it says to you is very much because it's in alignment with where you stand. I don't think you can do without weaving your politics with your religion, and his weaving of his politics with his religion matches with yours, and it doesn't with some other Christians. And I think that's where the argument is at. I think the baffling over the disagreement is a reflection of not thinking that your opponent have something valuable to say.
Okay, so I want to bring in here. You guys,
Yeah,
I mean, not
that's
to cut
fine.
this off.
But I go ahead. Sorry, Luke.
Okay. So like Sherry says this, I think this is true. Both viewpoints are contained within Christianity. That's the problem. They've been set up as a dichotomy. It has to be synthesized. How is that synthesized in a technological, global, federal, giant American government? How do you synthesize this? Because there's a big degree to which I think like my own personal convictions around these things are like, if you really care about, like for me, what I would do, it would probably be like very much a Tolstoy thing where somebody brought up Tolstoy and how his family just like hated him because he was such an idealistic radical that like he cared about the poor so much. It was like, he just would bring them into his house and say, you can take whatever you want. Like my house, like I turned my house into like an orphanage or where the homeless can come in and do all that. But then his family hated him because like their house was just chaotic. But like, is that Christian? Because that's what I often think of. Like, there's a lot of, this is the luxury belief part of it, is like you post things on Twitter, you say things on social media that you really care about the stranger and the outcast. Well, maybe if you really did, you'd instead of just talking, again, it's that line of like people in line talking about doing something and it just wraps around the block, and people in line actually doing something and like no one's in line.
So I think that the overwhelming symbolic message of the whole Bible is wedding imagery. Christ and the bride of Christ, and Christ is God, and the bride of Christ is humanity. It's all of humanity, and marriage is the thing that makes family out of a stranger. I mean, and you can have relationships that are not strictly marital that can bond people together, or adoption. And adoption is the other one. And so but that's the thing, is that it's not supposed to be it shouldn't be a dichotomy between like family and non-family, because eventually all humanity starts as one family, and then they eventually unite as one family. And it's and really what it is it's children being reconciled with God, their Father. And but without the like imagery of strong family, like a natural family love, those things are less meaningful. They're difficult to understand. So it is that you must have the both. But I mean, and I think that people need to and people do need to be generous out of the abundance of their love. Like that was the whole thing. I cannot just be focusing on my family. I need to bring like evangelism and inviting people into our household, but I do it to the degree where I can actually handle it.
So part of what I wanted to bring in, what I thought of, is there's this guy. I'm going to share it. Like this guy, I think, is a fantastic example of a Christian in action. This community first guy. He was on Rogan a while back, and he lives outside Austin, and he's a successful businessman. But what he essentially started doing is he created this like community with all these tiny homes and stuff where all these homeless people are free to come and live and do this. And he lives there too. He doesn't live apart from it. And he but it's because part of my struggle with these things is, and we've talked about this before, it has to do with the scale problem and the good. And I've said before, and I probably still think this is true, I don't know that the good operates at scale. I think evil does. And so and I think part of the problem is when we're talking about like the United States of America, which is this huge thing, and federal government, like I think it's very, very hard. This is part of why I'm a Christian anarchist, is to operate the good at the level of scale, because you have to work within systems and binaries, and it becomes automatically impersonal. Like what that guy is doing in Austin, where he's living with the homeless and they have community and they're all like, and there's accountability, and it's necessarily embodied because they're right there. It's unavoidable. They're living together. And so they deal with things in a way that is very symbiotic and synergistic. It's not just like, it's not the like hand out, teach a man to fish, or give him a fish, teach a man to fish. It's like you're living with them in your life, you know? And I don't know how government can really do that beyond like a feminine hospitality where they are trying to promote certain things and incentivize certain things. But like just hard policy, I don't think is going to be able to operate that.
I'm thinking about the whole thing about whether or not, like the Paul Kingsnorth thing is kind of, I'm reminded of that, about whether or not,
very related,
you know, it can exist. And part of me thinks like there's the angle where, you know, it's like even in the big bureaucratic system, there's almost like seeing or the people that constitute them, like seeing some spark that they could maybe, that ultimately everything would participate, or something like that. You know, that technology is redeemed in the end and such like that, as we've discussed and Peugeot's discussed and such. But another part of me thinks about is kind of pessimistic with regard to the system, perhaps otherwise named the system of the beast, such that I'm reminded of, you know, the time that Jesus fled into Egypt with his mother. I was talking with Sherry about that at one point, and how Egypt is a symbol of the womb, the feminine, and how maybe, and of course, when you're talking about embodied communities, it's just my favorite. And despite my not seeking that, although particularly over the past, you know, couple of weeks, I've really been trying to put my mind to like what might be appropriate in this regard. And I was talking with someone last night about maybe, you know, maybe like, again, my favorite thing about TLC is to talk about like estuary, the meetups, the video conversations, you know, and I think that, I don't know, maybe we should be thinking more about like parallel societies type of things. Like, I don't know how some people, I may be more pessimistic than some, but, you know, I mentioned the AI governance thing recently. I think we're in a pretty wild situation, you know, I think that it's only going to get more wild. And I think maybe it's time to think about more stuff like that. You know, of course, there's so many dangers, and it's a very taboo topic because nobody likes to, because it seems cultic and everyone's afraid, oh, it's a cult, you know, but in reality, I think that maybe something like this is kind of timely, you know?
Right. Yes. And I definitely want to, Mark, I want to hear what you say and make space for you, because I know you're, even just personally and relationally, because I know you've had a hard week, so we can just talk about that. It doesn't have to be ideas. We can kind of pivot if we need to, but like William said here, because this is I wanted to bring in the masculine feminine part of my title, because I got to fulfill my title, because I hear grim in my consciousness Congress. But like compassion equals toxic mother. Like that is true. There is such a thing as the malevolent matriarchy, which is the codependent enabling mother.
The Matrix.
Yeah. I mean, like that is a thing. And I think most of what's happening though in American politics is that's hidden, right? I think that's what this is me steel manning or seeing the seed of the truth in like the conservative right-leaning people is, and that's the toxic empathy that article was talking about, is they say like you can't absolutize empathy as just like a universal good, because that can be, I mean, it's not like the devil and demons won't trick you with empathy. Of course they will, you know? And so like that's part of the discussion too. It's a complicated issue. This is why the anarchist in me is just like, the government's too fucking big. Like this isn't something we should. Sorry. Oh, there's a child. I gotta watch my mouth. Okay, Mark, do you have thoughts, buddy?
Well, when I was battling the elements crossing the country, I was great. When I stopped and paid attention to the news, I was not so great.
Yeah. What does that tell you?
Exactly. It's the what I have within me is a conflict between the ethical. It's not quite Kierkegaardian, but it's his early work was dividing the ethical between the ethical and the aesthetic, and moral character is a high value for me. Having the strength of will to stand up for what you believe is right, and
I think that's
fight
true.
for what's right. That matters to me. On the other hand, if I did that and that's all I did, I would break most of the what little relationship I have with folks in the corner. It would, because there's just So now I have to prioritize relationship in the long term and empathy. Empathy is a weird one because it's probably more an aesthetic value than it is an ethical one.
I think there's sorry.
No, go ahead. If that connects for you, I'm just kind of working this stuff out myself. So
yeah, it's definitely very salient to me. Like, part of me thinks of empathy as like this spiritual faculty that we're called to develop, and like an epistemological way of knowing, like to know things through, like, I don't know. So when I hear, but I could also see how maybe empathy is like could be a wishy-washy thing. I feel like there's multiple definitions, like, as we've talked about with iconic, words.
Like even this to me is the culture war problem. The last remaining acceptable form of bigotry is against those with whom you disagree. Can you have empathy for people that you ideologically disagree with?
So what do you mean by empathy can become, I saw on my YouTube homepage, there's a recommended video. It's like empathy can become a weapon. And I'm like, is this, is this like the algorithm suggesting me to think about empathy in a way that is incorrect? And I'm like, I don't know. I generally think of empathy as like super good. So I'm interested in like how you see that it could be like.
When I was thinking about an example of my conflict is when you guys were talking about JD Vance. I think before you opened up the stream, Luke, I thought, well, he ain't broke no more.
Right.
And he's vice president of a country of 335 million people. And he's got to transcend to be, in my opinion, to be a man of character again, of moral fortitude. He has to be capable of transcending his childhood and all he's overcome to now embody his role as vice president of a 335 million people nation. And not only that, the nation that's at the center of a vast alliance, a network of nations. So it's half the world. And so I struggle between my holding his feet to the fire and not flippantly saying, you ain't broke no more, dummy. And part of me wants to just have that attitude. Part of me says, but he really needs to stand up and do what's right. So, and I do, there's a resentful reflex in my nature that for those who want to whitewash or rationalize what seems to be a weakness in character, there's that too. And I got to keep going back to empathy and trying to find the right application for empathy and still not lose my moral compass. Does that make sense, Demir? Luke, Michael?
Yeah. I feel that.
I gotta go, guys. Tayo's got the reins until I can
Yeah.
maybe come back.
I have to take off as well. I would love to stay in chat though, because this is a very interesting topic, like this, empathy and politics and how that relates to Christianity. But I do have to take off. I think I hear what you're saying, Mark. There, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You have a nice rest of your stream. Have a nice day, everybody. Bye.
I don't know if I did hear what you're saying, Mark, but that's more on me than on you. I think I sort of zoned off there a little bit.
I'm just, it's just what's the balance between the ethical and I'm used the word empathy. Maybe that's the wrong word. Loving, understanding. Not making things worse. You can. What's one of the Lukeisms, being right in the wrong way and versus being, that sort of business. It's
Yeah, I think that's why Luke brought up his quote earlier about the last remaining form of bigotry. I don't know how the quote ends, but yeah, something like that. Where from where you stand, did you? Because I still don't know exactly what's bothering you. Is it the quote by JD Vance itself, or the response to the quote by JD Vance?
Oh, it's not just the quote. It's the it's more the narrowness of vision that it's a nation isn't a household, certainly not one the size of the United States. It's not a family. It's as I said, it's a country of 335 million people at the center of a much larger collective of nations that are working towards a certain civilizational position in the world that's been in the making for 200 years or more.
Okay, I wonder.
He's not. There's a. Okay, go ahead. No, I was trying to clarify what my problem with Vance is that he's too. His vision is too small for the role he's in.
Is that that sounds to me like it's a feature, not a bug, because every president, every election where there's a new president elected, there is that sense of you're only president for the people that elected you, and the president.
It can't be that way in the United States, though. I mean, it may be in the UK where you have a parliamentary system. You can think that way, but in the United States, our choices are always binary.
Are you saying it wasn't that way? If it's not that way, then how can any president ever fulfill the manifesto that they run on?
Well, they fulfill it, but it's always restrained. And this is the problem that Americans always chafe at, but now this is a feature of the Constitution. Is power is constrained on every end. You have the executive is checked by the judiciary and the legislature. The legislature is checked by particularly by the judicial branch, and so on and so forth. And in the states, the federal government is limited by the states. The states have to report to the federal government and the larger constitution. No one has absolute power in the United States, and even every role is constrained, and there is no absolute power. And the reason for that is that the intention was to keep redirecting those in power back to the purpose of government and to its larger.
Sorry, Mark. I feel like I've taken us down the wrong path.
Well, I just yeah. I understand, and maybe I'm trying to answer your question, but that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, let me rewind. Michael, do you have if you have something to say, please go. But I wanted to rewind us back after you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay. So, I mean, I think it seems like as far as the statement goes, certainly like politicians should. I mean, the United States is the only country that anybody ever has expected to be more concerned with other countries than with itself. So like, and the fact that's like a controversial thing to say, like maybe we need to focus on fixing some of the things that are going on here rather than always focusing on the global stage. I don't think should be controversial for
I
a
think
political person.
To be fair, it sounded like Mark was saying that it wasn't even covering the width of the United States, not so much about the.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, there is like, I mean, this is the kind of the problem is the Constitution is supposed to have a checks and balances and a restraint of power, but there have been some aspects of the United States government that's gotten around that, like largely through, appointed bureaucracies and things. Like there's so many regulatory agencies that control so much stuff. Like, I mean, I work in the construction industry, and the amount of like red tape that you have to go through to build a house is ridiculous, like compared to somebody's actual like ability to do it or whatever. And some of those things are good and there are reasons for them, but it is like it's benefiting some people to a certain extent and harming a lot of people to a greater extent. And I mean,
but most of that red tape is imposed locally, not by the federal government. It's imposed by your local government, and state government. That's most of it.
Yeah. Well, but that's just. I mean, I'm just using that as the example of one area in which I work, but there are similar things across the board, and what I get to the point of is like, because I think personally, like the local church should be the one doing the most of the good stuff and doing it on the local level, and that's the level the level where it makes sense. And like, I was talking about that guy with the book that wrote the book about like the illegals, like. His whole thing of the church is to say, if the people that live in your neighborhood, if your church doesn't reflect like the demographic reality of your local neighborhood, your church is going to die. So when new people come into the country and they move into your neighborhood, you need to figure out how to get them into your church, and which means the church needs to be involved in the local level. Like, and that's kind of the problem, is that everybody just outsources so much stuff to the government. Like, because there used to be no government services or whatever, and now we just kind of assume that there are, and so that's the thing. I see the only really feasible solutions I see is real people getting involved in real things on a local level with their neighbor. The problem is how much difficulty comes when you try to do those things because of government services and things like that. And I think that there is a fair bit of that.
On that point, Mike, let me just say I got to go, but I'll agree with you 100% on that. Okay. I totally agree.
Yeah,
because I think we do need to. We really let the gates of the walls of our city fall regard to the church, and those are the walls we need to rebuild, or the position. The local churches need to rebuild their ministry in their communities and be what they should be locally.
Yeah.
Not all this political stuff is a distraction from doing the actual work of being the body of Christ right here and right now. So I totally agree with you on that. Yeah. Thank you, Tayo. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Michael, very much. I think well, I don't know. I guess I should ask: is that a point of agreement between conservative and Democrats, Christians, of agreeing that the church needs to be carrying most of the?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think, well, actually, I think that Paul Vanderklay had interviewed that guy that wrote the book about mega churches, and that's what he found was like that the more liberal mainline churches basically had abdicated their role in a lot of the social movements to government services, whereas like the big evangelical megachurches actually were more doing much more in the way of having programs and outreaches that actually help their community. So, and which is kind of the thing, that's why I got annoyed with a lot of the response online, because so much of it I saw as virtue signal, and especially the people trying to say like you're not being like Jesus because based on that kind of general information, posting Bible verses on Twitter is the only thing they're going to do to advocate for people who are in need, and they're probably not actually doing anything on the local level. The people that are actually doing it are too busy to be online.
Yeah, I think that's you're probably right. Just given the fact that you're talking about your virtues online, could indicate you're only doing that online, but it's not necessarily a proof that you're not doing anything else outside. But I tend to agree with you. Most of the people online talking about the things they're doing that should be getting done, actually getting things done. But so to give a bit of context, Sho Baraka released an album. He's a Christian hip hop artist. Basically, he released an album critiquing the conservative evangelical churches that weren't that basically started showing him when he was talking about social justice stuff. But his thing has always been his local church are very hospitable. They invite immigrants. All of the things are being done on the local church, and I thought that was where the disagreement was he wanted church to do more things locally, but it seems they just want different things done, and they've got different priorities.
I mean, and the other thing is like, because my personal experience, like when I was 20, all I thought there's nothing more important than just like the gospel message, and like people need it, and like why would you dedicate your time to anything other than like just reaching the lost or something like that? And then like this book is like the culmination of 20 years of me realizing like, oh, it's way more complicated than that, and I think that's the thing, is that and I you got a lot to say, huh? Like, because I voted for both sides. There was a book that came out by a guy called Jesus for President. I don't know if you ever heard of that, by Shane Claiborne, and it was like, and it was basically like one of these books. I think it was of that kind of emergent church generation, where that Rob Bell and those other ones that Paul's been talking about lately, and it's called Jesus for President, and it's basically just like, oh, look at all this stuff of the Sermon on the Mount and how conservatives are just care about being rich or something like that, and then it's just, and basically his whole thing has just been like vote for the Democrats, like, because he wrote that when it was like when Obama was running, and I voted for Obama, and then I realized like it was just a Democrat left version of Christianity. He wasn't trying to find the truth between the parties or whatever. It was just that his political alignment was informing his Christianity, and it was on the opposite side of like where the conservatives were. So
Yeah, that's from the outside looking in. That's sort of what it looks like from from it is there's a conservative way of being Christian and a democratic way of being Christian in America, and
Yeah.
where that synthesis lies, I'm not sure. But I think your book is even though I've not actually read it, I've heard you talk about it enough that it's in your book is an attempt to find that synthesis.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. But I mean, I think that, like, okay, if you're going to, I think the thing is so key is that if you're going to try to pit family against like non-family, we're not like a country of aristocratic elites or whatever. Like we're failing at family, you know, marriage is down, people aren't having kids, you know, abortion is a failure to you know, prioritize the rights of the least of these. I would absolutely say, you know, like, so it's not like, and actually, you know, it's interesting. So I know it was from a while ago, but Paul played that clip from his conversation with John Vervaeke and Jonathan Peugeot, and John Vervaeke was saying, like, we know the thing that makes people believe, like, we've put it to the scientific test, like, whether people are Christians or if they're atheists is dependent on the credible people in their lives. And so if the people that claim to be Christians are phonies and the people that speak honestly are atheists, somebody's going to grow up to be an atheist. But it's also the inverse. And so that means that Christians need to be genuine and like serious and credible in the way that they do things. And I think that starts with the family, you know, like, because that's the problem, is that parents who claim to be Christians that don't actually live that way, you know, they're not credible to their kids. So you need to, so we need to focus on the importance of family. And I think, because I think eventually a strong family should be the first place that can welcome in strangers and outsiders. Like, I mean, that was like the whole thing of, like when God comes to visit Abraham, you know, and Abraham is like running and telling the servants to get all the food or whatever, you know, right before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Like, that was like him showing extreme hospitality, but he didn't know who that was. He thought it was a stranger, but he could only show him the hospitality because he like had stuff to share, because he was like had taken care of his own situation there. And obviously God took care of him, like God blessed him, but that's the point. It's like God blesses people, and if they don't bless other, if God blesses people and they don't share from their wealth, they are accountable to that. That's selfish and that's wrong. But you know, to expect like people that don't have their own stuff in order to be you know, browbeating them because they're not being loving, which happens a lot in a lot of churches, is I think a pretty serious problem.
Wait, are you saying because America doesn't have an aristocracy that it comes from, that there's a sense in which family becomes more valuable, at least as valuable as the national identity?
Well, no, I'm just saying, like, it's not like it's not like there's this massive number of like elite families that are hoarding all the wealth, or like maybe they are or whatever, but on average, most people, it's hard to have a family in America now. Like, and it's you know, and like that's what they say, like the Gen Z's not really getting married because, you know, it's become this astronomical thing. I think some of the problems can be solved by people like probably being a little more creative and like where they choose to live and stuff like that. But like the American dream or whatever, as you would say, has become out of reach for most people. And that's actually a big problem with the whole, like, the boomers have no idea how easy they had it or how incredibly wealthy they were, and they've kind of taken that for granted. So because JD Vance, he's my same age, and so that's the thing, is like the older generation that didn't is kind of out of touch with like how things are. But like the American economy right now does not make it easy for someone to get married and have kids. You have to live sacrificially in order to do that.
Yeah. I think what you're saying is helping to frame JD Vance's that clip about basically making it easier for American families. That's what it's prioritizing, and you think that that's a
Well,
good place to start to get at the root of the problem.
yeah, I mean, I just think it's this thing of like, if you're like, people are being mad at people who are struggling for having a lack of compassion just because like there's somebody who's worse off or whatever. So, which, and when you really encounter that in real life, that is a powerful thing. It puts things in perspective, because like, so I would say like we have more debt than I would like. We've had to pay for things like car repairs and medical bills. We've had to put them on credit cards. We haven't been able to pay them off as quickly as we'd like. And so I could be like, well, that's, that stinks. But then I can also like see that other people have it much worse and be like, you know what, we still have a roof over our head. We can still afford these things. We're okay. We're not worried about not being able to put food on the table. So like and from that perspective, then even like my wife is always the person who, whenever somebody's sick or if they have a baby or anything like that, she's always organizing these meal trains for people. And, we're giving them, or she'll be like, this person's not, has something, and she sends them like a gift card for like DoorDash or whatever. Like, because, and it's like, I could be like, oh, we should really use that $50 to pay down the credit card bill, but it's actually not that. It is more important to help our neighbor. So we make like those choices in the little ways we can. But like it actually is the thing of, when you look at these like really destitute people, what are we doing to help them become people that aren't in that situation? Like, I don't know. I think there's something where there's just this kind of idea of fairness that hates like upward mobility. And I think that's kind of the bad attitude that I'm feeling conflict with.
I think that's fair, and I think there is definitely a huge amount of people that fall into that category of. Yet I think there's a sense in which, as you describe you and your wife's attitude towards giving, to put it in Christianese,
Yeah,
there is a sense in which that what you describe of giving despite knowing that you're not doing great yourself is antithetical to your, if I'm a lefty Christian American, I can hear what JD Vance says and says that's contradicting to the Christian life that you describe you and your wife is living, because he's saying focus on yourself first, and then think about the stranger after. But if you and your wife were doing that, you wouldn't give until you were, I don't know, millionaires or something. You wouldn't think to share or give to people that were lesser off. Uh, but I know that's not what he's saying, because you heard the same clip and you don't think it's antithetical to the way you live. But from a leftist Christian perspective, and also given the meme of all of what's going on, the post just Trump and his cabinet are just getting sworn in, um, the meme of tying Christianity with a particular party in America has been going on since Bush, from my recollection. So there's a sense in which the Christians on the left feel like the right have the monopoly over what it means to be Christian, and or what does your politics look like if you're Christian. And the right also think that the left have had a monopoly on what it means to be good or moral, um, in a political frame. So that argument I see playing out in this one clip in the comments that followed.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's just that's just, I guess, probably the big lesson is that everybody just needs to stay off social media more. I mean, because that's the whole thing too. Because it's always like with all of these things that people look for these it's because it's impossible to see the whole big picture. It's impossible to take in all of the suffering and all of the blessings that are everywhere. But we get it either through the way mainstream news went or on social media. We get these selected bits that we just need to be aware of the fact that these things are being selected for us in a way to craft a certain narrative. And even just with the way the algorithms work, the narrative that makes you upset is the one that gets the most engagement. So, and I don't think, but at the end, at the same time, I think that these things do scale, because I think that, if everybody ignores politics, then you do get whatever, the thing, like Mark was talking about in Honduras or these other countries where corruption is rampant, because the citizenry doesn't have a voice. They don't have the ability. I mean, so personally, my thing is I think people need to love their neighbor, in that Christian way. I also think in America, at least, in American context where you have the ability to do it, people need to think about taking on more responsibility, in politically. And I think it always has to start at the local level. It's not that's the thing, when rich people run for president or something, it's like a vanity thing. But you have to think about maybe Sam Tiedemann, he got on the school board but he's a parent of children that go to school in his area. So he's got a vested interest, and it's he's doing something about a situation that other people just want to complain about. So those opportunities are there, and I think that we're probably responsible for what we do with some of that stuff as well. So
I'm gonna bring this to a close, but this will be my final words. I'll give you the last words. I think JD mentioned earlier how estuary and TLC play into all this. I think because of what you've just said, Michael, about the importance of local participation, is sort of why Van Dunk insists that estuary and TLC be a separate thing, because we can come from different, we can pay attention to different things and have conversations with people that pay attention to things a little bit different to us online. But I think TLC has proven that once we start having that conversation, that we pay attention to more things that are similar than things that are not similar. So I think automatically an echo chamber forms around you when you're having conversations online. That whereas if you were having these conversations in a local estuary setting, you're going to have people that are paying attention to different things online, confronting other people that are paying attention to different things online in real life, and having to deal with that cognitive dissonance and figure that out. And if you can get over that and still remain friends afterwards, I think that's a better place to build from locally than thinking by convincing people online you can make a change. Yeah, that's my final words. Any
well,
final...
I think, and for that very reason, I think that I was really upset with the people that were saying like what he said is not Christian, because it's those like those basic things, like from starting from the family, like for God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten son. Like, isn't there a significance to the fact that it's a relationship between a father and a son in that gift? If we say that there's no important distinction between, in that familiar relationship, then why is he bother telling us? Like, and so I think that the importance of those things is that those are our first points of connection. We all have a mother, we all have a father, or we, even if we don't know them, if we don't know they're present, like that's the tragedy that proves the rule. It's the exception that proves the rule, and so those are our most basic points of agreement with each other. So we should strengthen and prioritize those, because that is how we relate to a stranger, is in the ways that we have common belief in the good. And I think family is like the first step of that.
Good place to end on. Thank you, Michael, and thank you everyone else for watching, and for Luke for starting this stream, and to Nate for giving me access to be able to keep it going. Just so everyone knows, chat is also streaming now, so cool. As this ends, the VNA experience continues on the Friday morning nameless.